So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Camilla Dottini. I'm a landscape architect with experience in urban greening and public realm design. Today, I'm going to talk about Fitz Park, which is a temporary parklet we delivered 3 years ago now with Arab, and the importance of the monitoring to demonstrate the value of streetscape installations. So as a landscape architect, one of my interests and passion is particularly in streets. Streets are a really important part of our cities, and even more now during the pandemic. In terms of central London, streets form the 80% of our public realm, but are very underutilized and low functioning. So if we take London as an example, looking back at 1882, our streets were originally laid out for horse and carts, and since then they've been adapted to fit cars and buses. And although the architecture and the design around the streets has changed, our streets often remain pretty much the same. And so many of our city streets have become congested, polluted, cluttered, and low functioning. So some of the drivers for change I see are around these aspects. In terms of health and well-being, as I mentioned, a lot of people use our streets every day, so it's really important that they feel streets are a safe and healthy environment that they can enjoy. For climate change, is a huge benefit that we can take from streets in terms of reducing the threats for natural disaster. And in terms of population growth, so by 2030, we expect to see London's population increase to 10 million. So streets will become busier, and the provision for high quality multifunctional space will become even more of a necessity. So there are ways in which we can improve our streetscape, and there's a lot of great examples worldwide. We can make changes to make our cities a lot more friendly for children, so little pocket parks, places for play, or even just playful furniture. For the elderly, we can create more seating, more spaces that make them feel more included. In terms of healthy streets, look at redesigning the streets to really promote sustainable active transport mode to encourage people to be out and using the streets, taking away some of the vehicle congestion. And looking at spaces like shared surface, we can really prioritize pedestrian and cyclists and make the streets feel more inclusive and more accessible for everyone. And then in terms of climate change, we can reduce water runoff through SATs, create shade through tree planting, and provide more biodiversity and habitat value. So overall, what we need is to see how our streets becoming a lot more multifunctional. At the moment, they are very low functioning and not providing as many value other than the movement. While this diagram shows how our street can provide environmental, social, and economic value. So building upon the growing Arab Cities Alive research series, Streets for People is an Arab initiative to promote the delivery of temporary public realm installations in urban environment quickly, cost effectively, in order to promote change in people's attitude towards road and inspire what a city can be in the future. One of the difficulties about creating multifunctional streetscapes environment and implementing them is often the high cost and the risk of them being successful. So temporary streetscape intervention offer the opportunity to measure the impact of the change at lower cost. So through small-scale intervention, a street can rapidly transform from a congested and polluted road into an active public space. Once the temporary measure have been installed, the space can be monitored over a period of time to assess whether the changes have been successful and ultimately inspire permanent change. So this is a famous example from New York City that shows Times Square transformed. This is a very successful example following the installation of the temporary street furniture and surface paint. The Department of Transport monitored the space, showing that the changes had successfully improved the traffic flow and increased safety whilst creating a new public space. So following the success demonstrated by the data and the support by local businesses and the people is now a permanent piece of public realm. So moving on to Fitzpark, we wanted to implement a small-scale temporary scheme in London and test it. So we wanted to work with the Fitzrovia Partnership Business Improvement District, which we have done a lot of work with previously around transport and green infrastructure. So we spoke with them about how we wanted a space that was close to our office in London, easy to reach, and potentially a space also for us to use. So we started a year-long conversation with the Fitzrovia Partnership and the Candle Council, as within the bid boundary, there were not many places to stop, and a small number of existing pocket park were highly used, particularly in summer. So they were very keen, and we ended up partnering with them and the Camden Council to identify a space that was suitable. We eventually found a spot in Windmill Street, which was a loading bay at the time. Windmill Street is a one-way street connecting Tottenham Court Road and Charles Street. And Camden agreed that we could install a temporary parklet for 6 months. Then from planter and seating, we partnered with Vestre, who donated part of the furniture, and we got also support from the Mayor of London, and the scheme was partly funded by Clean Air Better Business scheme from the GLA. So the ambition was to take out a delivery bay and install a parklet, which was made of a temporary decking base and a mix of seats and planters. Our landscape team at Arab helped with the planting, and in 3 days, the parklet was open to the public. We had to get a temporary traffic regulation order. The notification went up a month in advance, and Camden circulate all the drawings with the proposal to show what the parklet would look like. So the style and the furniture also matched the style of the existing street. So this was a great achievement and also a great opportunity for us to develop our monitoring methodology, as we wanted to find tangible way to show the positive impact that these small-scale spaces can have on cities. So we developed this process around simple steps. The key was to monitor the area of the parklet before and after the installation. So we started by observing and understanding people movement, so how people moved through the space, when people stopped, and well, and how long for. We also carried out a well-being and business questionnaire to understand which was the impact of the parklet on users' well-being and on the businesses surrounding the parklet. From the observation, we realized how the delivery bay was causing obstruction, stopping people from getting across the street. As soon as we installed the parklet, people were moving to it and along the street a lot more freely, and the parklet also encouraged traffic to slow down. With the pre-installation monitoring, we realized how people predominantly were standing in front of the business's door, as there were no space basically for people to sit. And then the rest of the people were just walking through the street only. While after the installation, people started using the parklet immediately. And if originally 68% of people used to walk through the street only, after the parklet installation, people were staying longer, dwelling longer, and therefore spending more money on the street. And from 68, the percentage went down to 45, and the amount of people spending more than 15, 30 minutes on the street went from 2 to 22%. And what was interesting was also the diversity of usage and activity recorded, like working meeting, reading, talking, particularly at lunchtime when the parklet attracted the largest number of users. We also did an ecology survey pre and post installation with one of our ecologists that demonstrated how the species selected were performing well in terms of attracting wildlife and increasing biodiversity without really causing lots of maintenance. So the finding included a variety of species, particularly on the lavender and the echinacea flower. The planting scheme was intentionally designed to provide visual interest, but also a long-lasting source of pollen and seeds. We did a well-being questionnaire, so an assessment about how people felt positive about being in the street. And here is where we collaborated with Kelly Watson, who was working from the Arrow Manchester office, and also doing a PhD on well-being on the University of Manchester. And the results from the questionnaire shown a massive increase of 41% between pre and post installation. A business owner survey was also carried out with the businesses along Wilming Street. And although some businesses were not fully supportive at the start, at the end, 100% of them wanted the installation to become a permanent feature in the future. And 70% of them also recognized a positive impact on their activity. So FitzPark was definitely a very successful experiment. It was supposed to stay in place for 6 months, but after all the positive results, the period was extended to a year and a half, and it has now been relocated on a piece of existing pavement close to Windmill Street. So since FitzPark, we have now installed more parklets and also got the opportunity to monitor some installed by others. Here are a few pictures of the Wild West End garden close to Marble Arch in London, parklet for the City of London, and a few in Liverpool last summer, which were very successful. So we are now working with the Hertfordshire County Council. The council received funding from the government to deliver a series of temporary intervention as a response to the pandemic for 10 high streets. And for each of the high streets, we have developed a design strategy. The need was to allow for additional space outside businesses, for people to populate the town centre, following social distancing and spending more time outside, also helping to boost the local economy. So the diagram shows the process we aimed for. So first, the council had to react to this event, installing the emergency measures that we've seen in many towns and cities to help the community immediately and allow for social distancing. Now we're going through an interim stage where the emergency cones and barriers are replaced by planters, tables and chairs, and other type of furniture. And we have now the opportunity to create new spaces which are visually beautiful, multifunctional, but still temporary. And through monitoring, if successful, could become permanent solution in the future. So we're now working with the BIDs to develop a monitoring strategy for each of the location to analyze and understand what people think about those spaces, how people use them, and if residents and businesses would like the temporary feature to be permanent in the future. So similarly to what we developed 3 years ago for FitzPark, we have the chance now to monitor the success of this installation, and hopefully we can demonstrate that the spaces are not only allowed for social distancing, but also can deliver multiple benefits. Thank you. And that was it.
Thank you very much, Camilla. That was fascinating. It's great to hear about those projects and the evidence you found to show the differences in how people use the spaces and how they feel afterwards. It's brilliant. We're just having a few issues with our Blackboard interface here, so we've not been able to receive any questions because believe it or not, the chat window isn't working. However, I can see some come through now, so that's great.
Okay.
It looks like it's working. So we're just going to spend a few minutes with some questions for you, if that's okay.
Sure.
So the first question here is from Amy Powell, and she asks, how did you actually monitor people in the street? What methodologies did you use to understand people's reaction to this?
So as I said earlier, we wanted a space that was close to our office. So what we did was basically we went on site, so on the street, on Windmill Street and at the parklet after the installation 3 times a week, 3 times a day. So during the morning, lunchtime, and then in the afternoon. And we observed people, basically with the people counting. We also took a photograph and we recorded a minute or video each time to then go back and sort of gather the data and analyze them. So it was, yeah, sort of a long process, more or less 3-4 weeks before the installation, and then 3-4 weeks after the installation.
Thank you. So, and thanks to Sam, who's fixed the chat box issue. We've now gone from a situation of having no questions to being overwhelmed with questions, which I guess is great. So I'm just going to pick a few. I assume you can see them as well there, Camilla, anyway.
Not sure where, but yeah, I can listen.
Okay, yeah, you can turn on the, well, I can't say with confidence that you can see them, but there should be an option to turn on chat on the bottom towards the right hand side of the window. But I'm going to pick some out for you anyway. So there's one question which is an interesting one about the ongoing maintenance of these parklets. Mm-hmm. And what the implications are of that, maybe for costs and for your ongoing involvement.
Yeah, so that's why we partnered with the bid, because the Fitz Rubber partnership was great. They were going out a few times during the week to basically, collect a litter, because the bin was also included into the parklet layout. And then, as I mentioned, like the planting scheme was designed to be very low maintenance. So the bid also partnered with another association that was already, for example, watering all the window boxes and planters around the area. And so they were going a couple of times per week in summer and one per week in winter to water planters. We also included a few tanks in the plant layout design. So when the association was going out to water the plant, they also filled the tank, so there was no necessity every day for the plants to receive water. So that was more or less the agreement.
Yeah, thank you. This may relate to another question actually, which was about whether it was artificial grass that was used.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Fitz Rubber partnership was quite keen on having Aspartaf on the base, because it was temporary, we had to use a decking base, so that was sort of a protection as well on top of it. But all the rest of the vegetation is obviously real.
I see. Okay. And there's one about kind of perceptions. So Tom asks, how can we combat the idea that parklets are only for the benefits of coffee shops and don't bring benefits to other retailers?
I guess it really depends on the character of the street, because like this one, for example, was, I think, a sort of a perfect location. It was a one-way, so already not too trafficked, and it was a variety of businesses along the street. So there was a gallery in front of it, right in front of the loading bay, and they were particularly happy on seeing this installation, because it means in general like more people were populating the street. And then obviously restaurants and cafe are the sort of more obvious one receiving sort of benefit in terms of a lot more people spending time at the park at the lunchtime, and obviously buying cafes and lunch from the businesses. But yeah, not only them, I would say.
Thank you. So you've helped to make that case. And I think that relates to a question about, so from Jenny, who said, did you provide an alternative to the loading bays, and were there objections to removing or relocating loading bays?
So at the beginning, that was what sort of raised question from the businesses, particularly the art gallery. But actually, again, the location was quite good, because there was another long loading bay very close, so actually at the end of the street to the right. So that didn't really cause any issue. And it was surprising how 100% of the businesses were then supportive for the parklet to become permanent. And so we actually didn't receive any objection and any sort of comment on the loading bay being used in another way.
So yeah, I think that relates to Pearl's question about feedback from delivery companies. Then, was there any feedback, or were you implying that there weren't any problems raised?
No, I would say for this particular example, not feedback related to it. Again, the street was a one way, and there were already a few parking bays and loading bays before and after the parklet. So I guess that was a good balance. Maybe actually highlighted how there was not a necessity for 2 or 3 along that stretch of the road. So yeah, that was quite positive.